right, so now to the questions. So I'm happy to have 15 of them, and I hope that more will come as we start this conversation. So, the most upvoted question is data vault modeling in the core as an evolution of the third normal form and the unified star schema in the presentation layer, the generally recommended architecture by Bill Inmon? I think this is yours.
When I think of Data Vault, I think of it as an extension of the work done in Data Warehouse. It's a refinement of Data Warehouse for other purposes, and I definitely see the Unified Star Schema fitting in with Data Vault data.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that makes it, though. Maybe Francesco, do you want to add a bit of detail on this?
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, the Unified Star Schema is an architecture. Pardon. It's my cocktail. How is it called?
It's Puppini Spritz.
Puppini Spritz. Okay. No, I didn't remember it. So the Unified Star Schema is an architecture that you always put in the presentation layer of the data warehouse. So it can be any type of data warehouse. Actually, it does not even need to be a data warehouse. It can also be the download of an API or something. Definitely, I'm collaborating a lot with the Data Vault community to build a Unified Star Schema on top of a Data Vault. Also, again, we have a Data Vault builder here today. But in general, it's a front-end solution that applies to any architecture.
Thank you. Serge, nothing to add?
It's kind of like what we were talking about today over lunch, that it's not an either or. It's a set of methodologies that apply if and when you need them. And there are use cases where Data Vault will significantly improve your performance and your ability to deliver. And there are many cases where it's going to be several steps back and not necessarily justified in the investment of time and capital. So definitely understand the fundamentals and the first principles of what these things are and where to use them, and then decide if and when to implement them.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can go to the next question. So I think this is Francesco's. So what is the experience with the Unified Star Schema in the near real-time use cases? Had you ever implemented?
Okay, no, I haven't implemented it, but I give a quick answer. With the Unified Star Schema, you have an additional step of calculation. So it's more time for the machine because it saves time to the users. So I would say it's one of those use cases where I would probably not recommend a Unified Star Schema because it slows down, because it's one more step. Unified Star Schema is ideal when you want to help your users to have a beautiful self-service experience. But because there is one more level of transformation, it may need 3 minutes instead of 2 or something like that.
Okay, thank you. So I've seen one from below. Yeah. Well, we'll get to it, I guess. So, the Puppini Bridge is better as table or as a materialized view?
Okay, so actually I would say neither. The best architecture that I recommend is to store as a physical table the stages. So if you have a table of sales of 1 million rows, then you will have a stage of the Puppini Bridge of 1 million rows, exactly the same number of rows. And you save as a physical tables those, and then I would recommend to build a view or a materialized view on top of the physical stage tables. That's the architecture that I recommend.
Okay, I think I see a lot of questions related to the Unified Star Schema, so I guess we'll get a bit through them so we can get back to Bill. So does the bridge have any limitations, and where would you see the advantage of the Unified Star Schema over the metrics layer?
I would say there are different solutions, but actually I have always implemented the Unified Star Schema in smaller data sets because I'm coming from the Click community and Click fits in memory by definition. So I was always implementing a full Puppini Bridge that has all the tables. So I don't have much experience on massive databases. That's why I'm here in a meetup also to exchange experience and do a bit of brainstorming. But long story short, I would say that the limitation of the bridge is when it's really massive data, and in that case it can be that the bridge is not the best solution. So it requires an engineer that thinks what is the best for your client.
Okay, thank you. So maybe let's go back a bit to a more abstract part. So Bill, where do you see the position of data lake and data warehouse in the enterprise architecture? Like, is it something that can be complementary? Is the term lake house actually a real thing?
First off, the term data lake means something quite different than a data lake house. I know they sound the same, but they're very different from each other. A data lake is something that turns into a swamp or a sewer very quickly, and we don't I talk to a lot of people a lot of times around the world, and I've never seen one organization be successful with a data lake. Now, if you're talking about a data lake house, I know they sound the same, and I didn't invent the terminology. Hadoop invented the term data lake, and Databricks invented the term data lake house. So please don't confuse a data lake and a data lake house. A data lake house, in many ways, is merely an extension of the data warehouse. You see, when data warehouses were created, really all we had in the corporation was structured data. But in today's world, in the corporation, we still have structured data, but we also have textual data, and we also have analog IoT data. So the data lakehouse is the same thing as a data warehouse, except that the data lakehouse is for textual data and analog data as well. I hope that clears it up.
Okay, thank you. And so what about you guys? Are you implementing models over data lakes? Do you see actually difference?
Actually, I'd like to point it back to Bill and ask him to elaborate if he can. In specifically with a lake house, the advantage you have is basically that you have a schema in some of the semi-structured data that you're treating, and there's implicitly some order in what you're receiving, and you can hit the ground running with a little bit of a context, but there's not necessarily an overarching data model unless you build one. So is there still that risk of devolving into a lake house swamp if you don't do it right? Or what's the key to getting a successful data?
The question you have asked to be answered properly would take us a week to answer the question, because that's a very complex question. We have classical data models for structured data, and we need them, and they're wonderful. You go to the world of text, and you have a completely different, you still have a data model, but it doesn't look like the data model that you're used to in structured data. When you get into the world of text, you have something called taxonomies and ontologies. And taxonomies and ontologies are fundamentally different from a data model. Now, when you get into analog data, you have yet another kind of data model. And it's not really a data model, but you have something called distillation algorithms in the world of analog and IoT data. So we definitely need data models for the different kinds of data. It's just that when people think of data models, they think of the data model that they've come to know and love in the world of structured systems. But when you get into the other kinds of data, you still have a need for a data model, very much so, but the data model itself is very different than what you're used to.
Thank you, Bill. We have a good question from the audience. And the audience doesn't know that you just came from a trip from China through, I think, Sweden and Denmark and basically all the world, and you're still able to be here with us tonight, which is great. The question is also, Bill, how do you manage to stay so up to date? I'm sorry for that. Up to date.
I'll be willing to bet that I'm the oldest person in this room, and maybe I'm not, but I would be surprised. But yes, I stay up to date by talking with people and working with people on a regular basis, and we most of the work that I do is back in the United States. Not all of it, but most of it is, and so. I work with people, I find out what their problems are, and help them to try to solve it.
Thank you, and we are happy to have you here to discuss with us and keep you in shape. So, to move to the next question. Oh, and it went up. So, okay. So, what do you think, you all guys, what are the hot topics for the following years? Bill first? Oh, yeah, you're right. You're the hot guy. So,
Hot topics. Well, I mean, the big elephant in the room is AI, and I don't know if we want to elaborate on each one, but AI, there's even within that space of AI, there's privacy, there's regulation, there's destabilization of existing ways of working and the way the world runs. So in that alone there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of figuring out. So it's maybe now just rounding the hype phase. We're getting around to what it can do and seeing, is it helpful? How can we, it's helpful in some areas and not others. What are those areas? Can we identify them? So that's going to keep us busy, I think. And with a new way of analyzing data, the spotlight swings back around to everything that we've been talking pretty much since there was data, which is what Bill started his conversation with, which is data quality, data integrity, trust, master data management. These things are not going away. They're only going to become more important because you're removing that developer in the basement from the equation of being there on the spot to quickly correct any mismatches and any typos. So, you know, the old stuff, the fundamentals haven't really gone away. They've just become more important.
thank you. And Bill, your take?
I want to begin my conversation with an image. And here we have technology, which includes AI, machine learning, mesh, and a bunch of other technologies sitting on a foundation of data. And one of the fundamental assumptions made by the people that build technology, including AI, is that we have the data and we can use it. That is a faulty assumption. This is like trying to build a 20-story building starting at the 10th floor. And I think people are going to ultimately be very disappointed in what happens to them in AI because they think they have the data on which to operate. They don't have the data on which to operate. And AI is no better than the data on which it operates. So I'm a skeptic, but that's why I'm a skeptic.
Well, and Francesco, your opinion, except that everyone is going to use the star schema now?
No, that's so loud. Oh my God. How can you speak? No, that's not my opinion. No, I think we are going through a phase where there are a lot of words. And honestly, just what I would like to say is that we should all do one step back and actually make sure that we are understanding each other on these words. Because I've seen too many times conversations among people who are talking about a topic which other name, and then there were some slight misunderstandings. So one recommendation that I have is actually, let's make sure that we are talking about the same thing. So what is the next hype? What is the next fashion? I'm really happy that other answers were given because I'm not much into fashion.
Okay, thank you. So for the next question, we're getting back to the Puppini Bridge. So in terms of the Puppini Bridge and computation cost, aren't we shifting the problem from the data warehouse to the visualization tool?
No, absolutely. The Puppini Bridge is an architecture that you implement in the data warehouse, and actually the visualization tools are going more and more to the direction of pushing down to the data warehouse. If you think about Click was loading the data in memory, and Click last year, they learned how to use SQL because they had to, because they couldn't bear anymore the load of so big data volumes. So BI tools are learning more and more to push down to the data warehouse. And even talking about Astrato, which implements a Puppini Bridge created on the fly, it's 100% pushing down to the data warehouse and to the cloud database. So definitely no. Also, one more thing. When you think about, for example, you want a report, you want to see your sales by year. So you push down to the database to for example, to your Snowflake, and then you receive back just as many rows, as many years of business you have. So you're elaborating on a data that has probably millions or even up to 1 billion of rows, but then what travels to the cables of internet is literally those 20 rows that represent the 20 years. So no, push down is the keyword.
So I think in case Andre is interested, we can show how Tableau translates the queries, because I think that's where the cost came to life. So coming back to the concept, to more abstract concept. So do you think the data mesh could become the new standard and replace traditional data warehouse concepts?
Thank you.
Do you have actually a strong opinion about data mesh at all?
I think that data mesh is a very good idea, but data mesh operates on the assumption that the data on which it operates is valid, consistent, believable data. And that is not a valid assumption. And as long as data mesh makes that assumption that is not valid, then its future does not look very good.
Well, but data mesh, it's not just about validity, but also about responsibility, which is shared, isn't it?
Yes, there are other elements of data mesh than data, but that's the starting assumption. And again, when you take something as robust and complex as data mesh and start with the wrong assumptions, you can't get very far.
You know, from what I've seen lately, like data mesh is one of the last unicorns that are traveling around, because I've heard the term a lot, but I haven't seen it implemented anywhere yet. Do you have, guys, a different experience?
Yeah, totally agree with Bill again that there's a huge assumption at the core of data mesh, which is the responsibility that is traditionally what they call in the monolithic data architecture team is shared across to the entire business. So it's not just one team ensuring data quality, building data models, building the pipelines and APIs to share that data out to the rest of the organization. But now that gets multiplied per data domain. So marketing team has their own architects and engineers, sales team has their own, central data team still doesn't go away, is still there. And at some point it sounds, wait a minute, if we can't get it right with one team, how are we going to get it right with multiple? And again, the assumption there is if you're big enough where one team can't possibly manage it, if they're competent but just not scalable, then yes, let's farm it out to the rest of the data domains, and everybody's free to choose their own technology stack, write their own documentation, as long as they're providing the APIs. And it's a beautiful dream, and if you get it right, then you get it right. But why is data mesh so popular? Because it doesn't give you any answers out of the box. It just opens the door to every vendor out there to say, yes, we're data mesh, we'll help you build your data mesh. This tool will provide data quality, this tool will provide APIs on the fly, this tool will document everything you're doing, and vendors have a field day with it. So, again, take everything in with a grain of salt and understand what it can and can't do and how much work it's going to require. It's not a panacea by any means.
Okay, thank you. So, what are the current best options for data pipeline management and DAC orchestration? Oof, tricky question. So I know that, Bill, that you founded actually the first company that was doing ETL in the world. but I don't know if you're still using ETL tools nowadays.
The whole concept of ETL hasn't changed. The implementation of ETL has changed. And in terms of maturity, in terms of products, I'll be honest with you, I don't keep up much with the ETL products and world. I left that world a long time ago and have been busy ever since. But I do know that there's a lot of ETL companies out there. I know they have a lot of techniques and approaches but the need for transformation of data, that hasn't changed. The way we do it, the tools and techniques, that very much has changed. But again, and you may find this hard to believe, I really don't keep up with the world of ETL.
Well, maybe it's to us, the younger generation, to give an answer to this then. So Serge, come on, when you last used an ETL tool? And what would you consider the best option?
I mean, you use an ETL tool whenever you need data in your data warehouse, so use it quite often. But I would, again, I would refrain from getting into the debate of best and worst, because the answer is always, it depends. And luckily, we live in a world where there's an abundance of choice, from allowing us to do the economic calculus on what makes sense for each organization. So maybe we have a very robust data team, but we don't have much of an engineering team. So rolling our own joint is not really an option. It would be more cost effective to get an out-of-the-box tool that is just a WYSIWYG UI and drag some lines around, and it's going to charge you per million records, and you're happy with that. Or vice versa. Maybe you have a super technical engineering team, and why would you pay some third party when they're good with Python, they're good with Airflow, they'll make everything run, they'll add all the bits that'll make it specific to your exact use case. It's really understanding the power of the distributed computing, cloud computing paradigm that we're living in today, and understanding where the software as a service makes sense, because we have people, and where do we best leverage them versus the technology stack that we would otherwise offload and free up those developers.
Well, I think it's also worth to mention that there are different concepts on ETL tools that you can find. And actually, we have several partners here in the room representing some of these. So you could have, for instance, the data vault builders working with models and abstract templates. I think somewhere here is Peter, I guess, there in the audience, so you can ask him. There's Kabula, who is basically offering a ready-made solution with you can run your queries and use a code-based approach. And I'm not sure about Astrato. It feels to me that it takes the transformation a bit away by using the bridge. So maybe it's a bit of a different concept as well. So there's Ralph from Astrato sitting in the first chair. So afterwards, I would say ask them during the party. Okay, so wow. Okay, that went quick. Bill, so what do you think about Microsoft Fabric? Do you have an opinion about that?
Microsoft's what?
Fabric.
I don't really follow Microsoft. The last conversation I had with Microsoft was about 1990. They don't. You're laughing. That's the truth. For whatever reason, Microsoft doesn't tell me anything. So I'm sorry. I can't answer the question because I don't know what they're talking about.
I think that was the answer, and I would say for doing some reviews on that, let's wait first when it actually starts working. So, okay, so a bit more philosophical. So Starschema is here for a while. Starschema is here for a while, and it is very well documented. And GenAI might solve the issue suggesting the correct data model on the fly. Why the bridge?
Oh, I like that. Why the bridge? Wonderful. Okay, it's very simple. If you remember my presentation earlier, so I was showing the two guys in the basement. So I think everyone thinks now that generative AI is going to solve all our problems. You're completely wrong. The guys in the basement will win again. Even with generative AI, you need to feed ChatGPT, for example, with a DDL code. And that's exactly a thing that the business user will not be able to do. So the guys in the basement win again. Generative AI is not a miracle. So generative AI is learning from humans. And humans are making a mess with this. So generative AI at its best can learn the same mess that we are making today manually. So the bridge is solving a problem that at the moment I don't see any hope that generative AI will solve. Eventually, one day, I'm embracing the technology. I believe in it because also Google Translate at the beginning was not good. Now it's much better. But you always have to remember that we have a future only if we combine technologies with our brain. Because otherwise, if you think that the robots will take over, well, it's not so easy. You still have to work. So yeah, that will not happen. Thank you.
So, guys, do you want to comment on this as well?
Yes and no.
No, I share that outlook as well. So it's all about discipline in the end. Everything that we go back to in this conversation leads back to understanding and knowing that there are no shortcuts and there are things that can accelerate what it is we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, there's no miracles. So data quality, due diligence, all of these things are still fundamental and at the core and come even before the large language models get trained and built.
Well, I guess a year ago we wouldn't even imagine having such an adoption of a natural language processing model like among us, and we might still be surprised of what it can be capable. But I guess it's discussion for the future. So, Bill, I think this goes to you. Have you actually met Ralph Kimball? And on which beer would you start to have a vocal argument with him?
You might be surprised to know that Ralph Kimball and I are friends. I used to have a conference and I invited Ralph Kimball every year. I used to find it to be really funny that there would be articles about Ralph Kimball and myself thinking that we had somehow fought or that was never the case. And let me talk a little bit about the Kimball approach versus the Inmon approach. The Kimball approach was answering a different question than the Inmon approach, and I think that's where the confusion comes in. The Kimball approach was answering how quickly can we get to analytical data from an application. I was answering the question, once we get to the data, can we believe it? And they may sound like the same question. They're not the same question at all. And so people wanted very quickly to do analytical processing, and the Kimball approach appeared to be very attractive to people like that. But if you, and I've done this, if you go back carefully and look into Ralph Kimball's work, he doesn't address the issue of believability of data and integration. What happens in the Kimball approach is you build data marts and you build them quickly and you build them well. And for 6 months' time, that seems like a very good thing to do. And then you wake up 2 years later and you've got this whole array of data marts and your user's saying, well, I've got data from here, and that's not quite the same data as data over here. Which one is right? And so that's the long-term effect of building the Kimball data model. So on a personal basis, however, Ralph Kimball and I have never had a negative word, and we've now Ralph, I don't know if you know it, is retired and in Hawaii. I haven't seen Ralph in a long time, but not once ever did he and I have a bad word for each other.
Okay. It's also true that you mentioned that his book is one of the must reads. Everyone serious in data warehousing should read, right?
If I had one thing to say about Ralph's work, Ralph wasn't talking about a data warehouse as we know it. Ralph was talking about something called a data mart. And if you could take a word processor and change every reference he made to a data warehouse and say a data mart, then the world would have been much less confused. But that didn't happen, and though there's a lot of confusion out there.
Well, I hope you'll help us to get him here on stage so sometimes this audience could hear his word as well.
I haven't talked with or seen, as far as I know, Ralph is in some house in Hawaii. I hope he didn't burn up in the recent fires we had in Hawaii, but I don't know. I heard he lives in Hawaii now, and he has not been active in our profession in a long time.
Okay, thank you. So coming back to more like modeling layering questions. So where do you see the position of OLAP semantic layer today? Would you switch completely over to Unified Star Schema rather than standard combination of fact dimensional tables?
Okay, so again, in this topic, again, it's the thing of the terms. So when you say OLAP and when you say semantic layer and when you say metrics layer, there are so many different interpretations of these terms that just naming them by the name is really creating a big confusion. I tell you what my understanding of semantic layer is the concept of decoupling the abstraction that the users need from the technology that the users are using. So it's a further level of abstraction. Do we need it? Probably yes. Yeah, these conversations are very dangerous. What I can say is that when it comes to the Unified Star Schema, one of the advantages is that it's strongly recommended to move the measures or metrics to the Puppini Bridge, which turns the Puppini Bridge into a giant fact table that can be used by any tool that was built with the mindset of the old OLAP concept, the concept of an OLAP multidimensional cube. So my vision, my dream, and actually my reality is that the Puppini Bridge is a very large fact table that can really answer a lot of questions. Details about the implementation, they don't deserve this stage. Implementations are changing according to the project and the particular needs of a project, and you cannot answer this at a very high level as we are doing now. My recommendation is always to keep in mind that engineers are the ones that are engineering. We don't have a motto that is now the Puppini Bridge, now the OLAP, now the semantic layer, now the metrics layer. No, it's not motto. We just put an engineer talking with the business teams, understanding what they need and designing a solution for them. This is the only recommendation that I have for you today.
So I'm kind of curious, Serge. I know that you haven't used yet the Unified Star Schema. So what is your modeling practice for the for the MART layer of the warehouse?
Good question. I don't know if you're trying to prompt me to go into my speech of there's no right answer. You have to sit down with the business and understand exactly what they need and how they're going to be using the data model that you're going to propose. The book that I wrote with the intention of kind of making the data modeling terminology, the semantics of it, the visual, the spoken, the concepts, was to boil it down to just the essentials, so that everyone can communicate, from the business teams to the data teams, in a strict set of terms that are that define exactly in a way that everyone is able to relate and also implement once it's been agreed. So the answer is always going to be how mature is your organization? How data literate are your end users? Are you comfortable giving them a third normal form standard of something that they can pull together, maybe using a Puppini Bridge on the fly? And otherwise, do they need a one big table, without even getting into the technology and the underlying factors of which one will be more performant, what is the size of the data set? It's always going to be, it has to be a discussion in terms of what you're planning to build. So there's never a one size fits all of, do Kimball, do Starschema. Understand exactly what you're building and who you're building it for. And there's a lot of nuance in the way businesses interact or data teams interact. Understanding and speaking with the business users, you can very quickly get a sense of how much they understand even their own domains, how good the data or how bad the data is, and how likely is it that it'll change midway through your development cycle. All of these things come with experience and time, and being able to, I guess, chart the course of what it is you're building is really the hallmark of a good architect or a mature data team, and learning to lead the business and have the conversation to make sure you travel that road together and don't create conflicts and surprises when you've reached what you thought was the destination is really the gold standard of what we should be aiming to do.
Remaining a bit more to you, there are questions from the public that didn't read your book. What is your book about? And I have to say that even though you're saying a lot of maybes and depends, actually it's quite a stark contrast with the book, where I find particularly valuable because there's a clear implementation approach to very particular problems. But maybe could you describe a bit in your words what some people in the audience are missing?
Sure. For those who don't know me or my book, I came from the SAP world and transitioned to Snowflake and never looked back. And I wanted to write a book that, yes, some of you know why. I wanted to write a book that, I'm not going to go into the details of the difference of modeling and architecture of the two platforms. I just wanted to write a book that would have been something that I wish I had when I was starting in either one of those. When I was starting my data career and I wanted to understand the fundamentals of SQL and modeling and databases, the fundamentals of Snowflake once I started with the Snowflake platform, just to be able to not just write queries. Anybody can spend the weekend learning SQL and understand joins, but understand the ins and outs of the actual platform that will then save time and money and resources on the actual implementation. Know exactly how the platform manages memory, how it manages cache, where we can utilize it, which operations are going to be more memory intensive than others, and bring all of that into a conversation of, once we start building, the book is kind of written in this spiral helix type of way. It never explains a concept that it hasn't explained. It never uses a concept that it hasn't explained. And it starts simple with why it is we're building what we're building. Why is it important to have and mean one thing when we use one term? And once you've understood that, you can kind of take it into that next level of, okay, now that I know what it is, here are the tools, here are the queries, here are the ways that I can actually implement it. So the example we were using was type 2 dimension. And there's lots of modeling books that will explain from type 0 all the way to type 6 and 7. And a type 2 dimension is very simple on paper. It's a dimension, and it has 2 extra columns, valid from and valid to. But is that enough to go off and build a cost-effective loading strategy, change data capture strategy on any given platform? No. Even if you were talking about a generic type of SQL statement to merge into and keep this thing up to date, that's already a good chunk of explanation that just saying 2 extra columns doesn't really cover. But also, once you leverage the platform architectures like streams to make sure you're not you can actually reuse the change logs that the system generates to generate those snapshots, then you can go a step further, and all of this kind of builds one topic to another. And what Juliana was saying is, again, I don't say always use Starschema, always use Data Vault. I just use those examples in context to show you, I'm just maybe talking about something specific, but always hinting at the general of, if you had to do it slightly differently, these are the tools that you have. And that's kind of, it's the only book that brings all those elements, from the very, very technical SQL to the very simple general descriptions, and gives you end-to-end explanation.
So, thank you, Serge. Staying on the book note, because I saw a couple of questions regarding that. So the first one is, Bill, are you preparing any other book? Are you working on something right now?
I'm sorry.
If you are working on some book right now, so what is your next work?
The next book coming out in the first of the year is a development methodology for the data lakehouse. I mentioned that bringing textual data, analog data, and structured data together was a challenging thing to do a while back. I was doing some work in South Africa, of all places, and this lady came up and asked me, she said, gee, where is a development methodology for the data lakehouse? So we are going to have the book coming out in about January. I believe that Databricks is going to be participating in the book as well. So that's the next book. And I have to tell you, one of these days, I'm going to write my last book. That book is number 68, and I look back at my life and I cannot believe that anybody has ever written 68 books. And just for a little point of reference, my sister is a writer as well, and she's written 28 books, but she has her own fan club, and I don't have my own fan club.
What is this? Come on, seriously?
All right. And what about recommendation? I mean, there's probably some people in the audience that are starting with our profession. So what book should they read? What would you recommend if you had to pick 2 or 3? Well, I would advise to start with Serge book, actually, because it's a great summarization of what happened and what the terms are. And Unified Star Schema is obvious. So now, guys, let's speak about other guys. What influenced you the most?
Well, you said profession. You didn't necessarily name any specific one, but I think the answers are going to be very different depending on which, even in our fragmented field of data science, data engineering, data architecture, I think that whichever road you end up going down, the technical Bible, you're going to know it. It's going to be unknown before you get there. Your colleagues will be able to recommend exactly what it is. So all of these books, we have one of the authors of some of the seminal works in the space on the stage. It's not a mystery what they are. I think the overlooked thing is, no matter which one of those professions you end up in, you can't escape speaking to the business. And this is something that is the most overlooked skill in our industry, of an engineer who's able to sit down with a business user and communicate effectively and see eye to eye. So I would recommend anything in the communication and understanding, and whether you approach that from psychology, sociology, writing, journalism, anything is a step in the right direction in terms of find out what your weak spots are in terms of effective communication, and work on those. And yeah.
Thank you. And what about you, Francesco? If you were starting again, which books would you wish you've read?
If I was starting again. No, I think the most fair advice that I can give is rather from a friend of mine, Christian Kaul, who is running the data modeling Munich meetup. And he has really made an entire website where he's reviewing all the books that he wrote. So I think is the most honest advice that I can give. Check the data modeling Munich and find out this. I can give you the detail, but I guess you will find it because it's very exhaustive and it's organized in sections. That's probably the best referring point you can have.
Yeah, I've seen that list and I second that. It's very good.
Okay, great.
Well, and I would say maybe start with the ones who founded it. There are like two books. One is Inmon's and second is Kimball's about data warehousing. And most of the terms that we're using at work are derived from that. So it's a good start.
Yeah, although I have to say the books of Kimball, there are 3. Each of them has 700 pages, and I've never understood the difference between the 3 books. I wanted to say it, so now I say it.
Well, it's
I
fine.
never
You just
understood
pick
it.
one at random and you will be
Honestly,
okay, right?
I find it super redundant.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry.
I really can only speak to data architecture because that's what I write. I mean, there are books on programming that you need. There's books on all kinds of subjects that you need. But when it comes to data architecture, which is what I write about, I recommend the first book that I wrote that was a bestseller. It's called Building the Data Warehouse. This tells you the basic concept of why we build a data warehouse and a little bit about what it is. And then recently, Databricks and myself published a book on Data Lakehouse, which talks about the modern version of a data warehouse. So those would be the 2 books that I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. So we have, I wouldn't say a question, more of a statement. So who's up for starting the Bill Inmon's fan club here in Prague at this community? Just raise your hand.
Yeah.
And let's do this. Okay, so we're going back more technical questions. So we have a couple of questions about Snowflake versus Databricks, and I'll try to pack them a bit together. I would say we have 15 minutes we could go with this discussion because there are tons of questions, so I hope you're not tired yet.
I have a question. Aren't we supposed to have drinks at some point?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I want to end it. So I will pick just 3 last questions and then we'll go to the bar. So the first of the 3, and you have the last chance to upvote anything you might find of relevance. So is normalization of data still relevant in the context of databases able to query big fat tables? So is normalization still necessary today?
Let me take this. There's a false myth that normalization was invented because the storage on disk many years ago was very expensive, and for this reason normalization was the answer to that, because you were storing each piece of information only once, and you were saving on space. And then the myth is that now that the storage of data is very cheap, then you don't need that anymore. But that's completely wrong. I am a person who is focused on semantics. Now tell me a thing, and let's be reasonable. When you have a database and you have to speak about, to make a list of clients, wouldn't you put it in a table called clients? And when you have a list of products, wouldn't you put it on a list, on a table called products? So the point is normalization is just a logical thing to do because you're putting each thing in the right place. That's it. So it has nothing to do with the fact that today it's data storage is cheaper, so you can put all together. Okay, thank you, wonderful. So we can put all together. So we make a big Italian spaghetti of products and clients and everything. That's wrong. Normalization is needed because it is logical.
Well, I think the world needs more spaghetti, so...
Yeah, I agree. And soon.
Right. So, okay, I think I bit deleted the questions that were too on specific technology. But this one seems interesting. So, do you see a big progress in data maturity of the companies in the last decades? There's still a great portion of spreadsheet data mass-driven companies nowadays. Maybe, Bill, could you take up this one and describe how it was in your times and what are the changes that you perceive today?
I hesitate to answer this question with honesty because you're probably not going to like what I say. But
you are in your fun club here. We all like what you say. It's your fun club.
And it's okay because we have a lot of work here still, so I think you can say it.
And the answer to the question may be only applicable to American vendors, but American vendors have this bad habit of not telling the truth. And there's an old saying, how can you tell when a vendor is lying? And the answer is when their lips are moving. That's how you tell when a vendor is lying. Vendors like to tell grossly exaggerated tales of what their products can do. If you don't believe me, there's something you should look up, and you should look this up anyway. There's something called the Gartner Group hype curve. And what the Gartner Group hype curve shows is that when a product comes to the marketplace, it receives a huge amount of expectation and press. And then over time, the reality of the marketplace shows the reality of the product. And the hype curve for Gartner has been in existence for as long as there has been the computer. Today, in the hype curve, we have a ChatGPT, that there is a huge amount of money that's out there pushing ChatGPT, and the expectation for ChatGPT exceeds far and away anything ChatGPT is going to do. But it's not just ChatGPT. Do you remember data science? Do you remember big data? Do you remember .com? Do you remember, and the list is a long list of things that vendors have come along and told us they're going to do these great things, and then they never ever fulfill what they have achieved. And so part of being a vendor, and again, I hope in Europe that it's better than in the United States. But in the United States, these people, these that make budgets in corporations, they actually believe what the vendors are saying. They don't have the maturity or the intelligence to look through what the vendor hype is. So, by the way, and I really recommend this. I don't know if you've ever even heard of or being aware of what's called the Gartner Group hype curve, but you should look it up and do research on it. So I have very little faith in the vendors of the United States.
Well, I think we kind of all know about this curve because we're always waiting to reach the plateau finally so we can do the work that actually has any sense.
I say this in all honesty, from a standpoint of being in Europe, you look to the United States for leadership, but you don't really get leadership in the United States. I think that it's wise to stand back, wait until the hype curve goes down, and then start to make your plans and investments. So I think waiting and seeing what happens and the reality is the smartest proposition. I know that's what I would be doing. And I think that, I was in China 3 weeks ago. China's the same way. Everybody thinks, well, the United States is leading the way. The United States is not leading the way. The United States is just following the hype curve, and they are wasting huge amounts of opportunity and money.
Well, thank you. By the way, my favorite lies are, it's gonna be easy to export the data and it is well documented. So, guys, do you have anything to add to this? Francesco?
I mean, my bottom line is we all wait for that technology that is stealing our job. Well, it's not happening. You're still needed. Even with ChatGPT, you're still needed. We still need to go to work. That's my last statement.
Yeah, well, we will have to explain business users how to use ChatGPT, right? So, Serge, anything you would like to add? All right. So, and I think we're getting to the last two questions. So, what do you see as the biggest challenges in maintaining a good data quality? This is a bit trust issue question.
Has it ever happened to maintain a good quality?
The number one factor for achieving data quality is pain. Why are you laughing? That's the truth. That organizations that feel pain and make mistakes and wonder why they make mistakes, those are the organizations that understand the value of data quality. You show me an organization that doesn't have any pain and they could care less about data quality. So, and I know that it's crude to say that pain is what motivates corporations, except that's the truth.
Well, I think it is funny because it's true, right? So, Serge, Francesco, anything you would like to add to this?
I think that we're at an interesting point where we're just kind of cresting the wave of big data and the catastrophic failure of that and everything they promised. We're still kind of riding the wave of agile, and we're starting to see the limitations of agile. And agile promised us speed, and speed, when you go for speed, you sacrifice quality. And they say in the military, smooth is fast, and forget the rest of the quote. But it's like that if you wanna really not trip over, slow down and make sure what you're doing is thought through from beginning to end. And in an agile methodology, there's just no time for actually thinking. You can't put a deliverable in, I'm going to think about which steps to implement. It's always deliver, go back, fix, and fine, you can do it in 2-week increments. So we're still kind of learning the approach on where do we even fit data quality strategically into our working model. And I think we'll get there. I think the fact that everyone is all of a sudden rediscovering data modeling as if anything we do is possible without some form of data model, the fact that people are learning to communicate over a data model and using that to inform decisions, agree decisions before they get implemented, and the 80-20 rule of fixing something that's already been implemented is 80% more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. I think we will start moving in the right direction for precisely the reason that Bill just said of we've already been through about a decade and a half of pain, and there's only so far we can go before we realize there's different ways and there's changes that need to be made, and they're not really dramatic changes. They're really just going back to the fundamentals and doing what makes just logical sense to do from the ground up.
Thank you. Francesco? I think we are all good. Okay, so we have time for the last question, and I think it's quite well suited. So, Bill, what inspired your approach to data warehousing, and how do you see it evolving in the future?
Well, As long as corporations need data that can be believed in, we need a data warehouse. If the day ever comes when we don't have corporations that need data that they can believe, then we don't need a data warehouse. Number one. Number two, a data warehouse is never built. That's something that people have problems with. But as long as your business is changing, as long as government regulations, economy, competition, products, packaging of products, as long as those things change, then your data warehouse is also going to be changing. What's in the future? What's in the future is looking to bring in different forms of data. It's not just structured data. There is a world of business value waiting with textual data and with analog data. And the world has yet to discover that there's great power in both of those kinds of data. So what's in the future? Different kinds of data are in the future. More pain is in. I'm going to tell you right now, pain is your best friend because pain is a motivating factor. And if a corporation can't be motivated any other way, then pain is what it takes. So we have more pain ahead of us. We have a change. The world is constantly changing in terms of economy and competition and things like that. And it's going to continue to change. So I get asked the question, when are we through building your data warehouse? And the answer is never. Now that's a little bit deceptive because the change that occurs over time is incremental change. You don't have to rebuild the whole data warehouse. You only have to rebuild pieces and small parts of the data warehouse. But do you have to? Are you ever finished? You're finished when your business is finished. So what's in the future? Textual data. People haven't even begun to discover the value that's wrapped up in textual data. And the same goes for analog IoT data. There's a tremendous amount of value there that nobody is looking at.
Thank you, Bill.
Can I just add something real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And I completely butchered that quote because I wasn't going slow. And my mouth was moving faster than my head was working. But there it is, proof in the pudding.
All right. Francesco, Bill, Serge, it was really an honor to have you as guest here on the 9th edition of the Data Punkers meetup in Prague. And I would say let's smoothly move to the bar and continue the party there. The venue is going to be open for at least 1 hour, so please take your time, ask the question that you have to the guys, and thank you for having you all here.
The Bill Inmon Fan Club! Yeah!